All right, a call to order this regular meeting of council for Tuesday, October 1st, 2024. Turning first to the Land Acknowledgement, we just recognized National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, and I want to take a moment to acknowledge the significance of this day, and also setting the tone that this isn't about just one day. This is about a repeated practice and recognition throughout the year. The National Day for Truth and Reconciliation serves as a somber reminder of the painful history and lasting impact of residential schools in Canada, as well as the systemic discrimination faced by Indigenous peoples. On this day, we remember the thousands of Indigenous children who were forcibly taken from their families, many of whom never returned home. It is a day for reflection, learning, and most importantly, a commitment to a path of healing and meaningful reconciliation with Indigenous communities. Let us honor the survivors, their families, and those who never made it back by making every effort to understand their stories and ensure such tragedies never happen again. And in the spirit of truth and reconciliation, I acknowledge that we are gathered in the heart of Treaty 7 territory of southern Alberta. This land is home to the Blackfoot Confederacy, consisting of the Siksika, Kainai, and Piikani First Nations, also the Tsuut'ina First Nations, and our most adjacent Indigenous neighbors, the Iharte Nakota, comprised of the Bearspaw, Goodstoney, and Chiniki First Nations. Further, we are located within the Rocky View Métis District within the Battle River Territory. The town of Canmore is committed to work to live in right relations and to advance truth and reconciliation as we acknowledge the many Indigenous peoples whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. I'm grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers and elders who are still with us today and those who have gone before us. As we are all treaty people, we each have ongoing responsibilities to protect and honor all life. Turning now to the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, I move that we approve the agenda for October 1st, 2024 regular meeting of council as circulated. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And now, moving to the public hearing. I call to order the public hearing for Bylaw 2024-17. The purpose of this bylaw is to close a portion of road right-of-way. The public hearing will proceed as follows. After I provide this introduction, administration will provide a summary of the matter under consideration to set a context for the hearing. Council will have opportunity to ask questions of administration after their presentation. Then I will invite members of the public to speak. There will be an opportunity for council to ask questions of clarification after each speaker presents. Once anyone present who wishes to speak has done so, the municipal clerk will provide the names of those who provided written submissions. Then council will again have opportunity to ask questions of administration before the public hearing is closed. With that, let's move to the administration's presentation. Mr. Schneider, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. This is like the red green, you know, women find you not so handy.
It's on the other side of your left.
It is? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Whew.
There we go.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This is Bylaw 2024-17, which is a proposed road closure at 1405 and 1407 Mountain Avenue, and that's right where Mountain Avenue and Hospital Place meet. Council reviewed the staff report at the September meeting. This is a technical requirement to implement the TP Town Road right-of-way pilot project. The intention is to close a portion of Mountain Avenue and then eventually consolidate it into a property with the proceeds of the sale going to CCH. And it'll allow for a developer to provide an expanded footprint for an residential intensification project through a development permit later. The normal procedure for road closure bylaws is we give notice to the surrounding area, which we have. The public hearing, which we're having today, we've given notice to utility agencies who will provide comment to us, and assuming that council is satisfied that we can proceed with the approvals, once we have all the utility agencies' comments, we then forward it to the Ministry of Transportation and Economic Development for ministerial sign-off. Once that happens, then it comes back to council for second and third reading. We have received one comment, I believe, from EPCOR, and there'll have to be a street light that will be relocated as part of the development permit process, and we're eagerly awaiting the other agencies to provide some form of concurrence. So this is the survey plan, which of the road which is to be closed. I will have a very small amendment to the amending bylaw when we come back later for consideration, and our recommendation is that we continue with the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider. Just looking to council to see if there are any questions. Councillor Graham.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Schneider. I was wondering, the funds that are going to CCH, how are they going there? Are we going as... is that...
So that would be for, it's not relevant to this particular item. This is just the road right-of-way closure. We're not dealing with any sale of it or anything like that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. Okay, I'm looking to see if there is anyone gathered here that would like to speak to this public hearing. I know we have no one registered. Seeing none, I will now ask the clerk to read in the name of any written submissions that we've received.
Yes, we received one written submission in favor from Dale Hildebrand.
Great. Thank you. Okay, before closing this hearing, any questions arising from council? All right, well, I close the public hearing. Returning to our agenda, item D1, minutes of the August 20th regular meeting of council. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll move that the minutes of August 20th, 2024 regular meeting of council be approved as circulated. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Now moving to the minutes of September 3rd. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I move approval of the minutes of the September 3rd, 2024 regular meeting of council as circulated. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And now we'll move to G1, which is back to the subject matter that we just had a public hearing on. And Mr. Schneider, you're going to speak to an amendment.
I am. There was a typographical error in the original bylaw, which described the size of the parcel. The original bylaw says 875 square meters. The actual surveyed area is 255.
Okay.
So the recommendation is to substitute the number, and then recommendation that administration is directed to proceed and keep on moving with this application.
Great, thank you. Any questions of council or from council? Do you have any questions of council?
No, sir.
All right, seeing none. Thank you very much, Mr. Schneider. Okay, I will move that council amend Section 2 of the Road Closure Bylaw 2024-17 Mountain Avenue by striking out 875 and substituting 255. Anybody like to speak to that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I'll now move that council direct administration to forward the required materials respecting road closure bylaw 2024-17 Mountain Avenue to the Minister of Transportation and Economic Corridors for approval. Would anybody like to speak to that motion? Seeing none, I call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Now we'll move to item G2, Land Use Bylaw Amendment 2024-22, Wildlife Exclusion Fencing. Mr. Schneider, it's Mr. Schneider's show today.
Oh, Lord. I feel like I'm the opening act at a Vegas show or something like that. This is a very short and technical amendment that, with respect to wildlife exclusionary fence installations, and it's related to a motion that council passed requesting that we bring this type of amendment forward. This was passed back in March. And it allows for the installation of wildlife exclusionary fencing according to approved area structure plans, approved capital projects, and any other fencing that's deemed necessary by either the town or by the province. It'll enable the construction to commence on wildlife fencing surrounding the Three Sisters Village project, which actually will be getting underway shortly. We've just issued a subdivision approval for the first phase. So what this will do is it provides a bylaw definition of wildlife exclusionary fencing, and it also exempts, provided it meets those criteria which I just mentioned, it exempts the fenced installation from a development permit. So our recommendation is that council give first reading to this bylaw, and that a public hearing be scheduled for the regular November council meeting. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Looking to council to see if there are any questions. I understand it's a somewhat related topic, but it's a little tangential. I understand that we're, and I don't know if you can speak to this, at the Committee of the Whole, we're going to get a visit by the province, and they're going to give us an update on the exclusionary fencing that they're planning for along the Trans-Canada. Is that correct? Great. So we'll look forward to that. And I don't see any questions. Oh, maybe we do. Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Your Worship. Given that there's no requirement for development permit, does administration still get a bit of a preview of what the fencing might look like?
Yeah, we do, and our administration are working with the province to provide comments through the review. But in the case of Three Sisters Village, it's really more of a provincially driven driven project, but we are consulted with along the way.
Okay, great. So we still have like some idea of what it looks like and stuff. Okay, thank you.
With no development permit, is there a building permit that's required? No? Nothing
No,
like
there
that?
won't be.
No, okay. All right. Okay, so looking to see if there are any other questions. Seeing none, thank you very much. I move that council give first reading to revised land use bylaw amendment 2024-22, wildlife exclusion fencing, and schedule a public hearing for November 5th, 2024. In speaking to the motion, I support this. I believe that it fills a gap in our land use bylaw and allows for a streamlined process. Of course, the check and balance is that it has to be required by an ASP or an ARP or some other requirement of under the jurisdiction of Alberta or the town. And so I appreciate that this will now be in our land use bylaw if approved. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Okay. The agenda calls for a break right about now, but I think we're okay. We're rolling along. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's move to Mr. Drzyzak. Welcome to Council, and we'll move to item G3, Council Code of Conduct Bylaw 2024-06. Good morning.
Good morning, thank you. There's a written staff report for this one that lays out all the specific amendments that are being proposed here, as well as a red line of the old bylaw and a whole clean copy of the new one. So this presentation will really just be to summarize those amendments and keep us on track. So why are we here? There's an MGA requirement to periodically review the bylaw. Administration did that. Council did that as well through committee of the whole. And the recommendations here today come straight from committee of the whole. In some cases, word for word from the resolutions, and in other cases, the resolution was for administration to do research and come back with options, and I've flagged what those are. In the staff report, Model A is the recommended option, and Models B's and C's are other options that we found just for comparison's sake. We're also here because the bylaw format has changed since this bylaw was first made. So the red line version of the old bylaw is really just for convenience, so you can see the changes. The actual bylaw that we're recommending to be passed will be an entire new bylaw, repeal and replace in all the new format. So my presentation refers to the section numbers in the new bylaw because the old one will be irrelevant. All right, so first recommendation was to research sanctions, and really the MGA list is the go-to list for most municipalities. What we're recommending is to provide council with discretion to impose other sanctions or remedies as recommended by an investigator. And the rationale there is that sanctions are typically seen as punitive in nature, and there may be cases where you want more of a broader scope of remedies. Next new addition is some factors to guide discretion. So council can consider, okay, what are we going to do in this case based on reviewing those factors. So that's in section 63 and 64 of the new bylaw. Next motion was to provide the complaint to councillors where the complainant is a member of council. So that's just straightforward written in to section 44 of the new bylaw. Next one is to research alternative dispute resolution. And there's many options out there. What we're recommending here is more options, more service providers, with the exception of some matters that are unsuitable for alternative dispute resolution. So what it means is once a complaint's filed, there's more that can be done, rather than an investigator being required to attempt mediation if they don't want to proceed. Now the investigator can refer complaints to different streams. And that's in section 47 to 49 of the new bylaw. This one's straightforward, straight out of the COW recommendation. The investigation report is provided to all members of council. This was another one asking for research on options for reporting to complainants and respondents. The current bylaw commits to providing full investigation reports to respondents, to complainants. The administration's original recommendation from COW was to think carefully about that and provide some discretion on what should be disclosed to complainants. We reviewed several models, and the recommended model basically commits to providing the complainant with some level of reporting, but lets council decide whether that would be the full investigation report or a summary of that report. And there's another new clause added to the bylaw for council to make that decision at the end of the process if they haven't already done so along the way. And that's in section 54 and 62. The spectrum ran from everything like we currently have today in our bylaw all the way to providing no commitments or guidance to receive anything at the back end whatsoever. So this one kind of strikes the middle ground. Another request for research. This one, again, was about giving respondents a chance to comment on preliminary findings. The bylaw as it stands would have them provide those comments on an investigation report to the investigator. At COW, we discussed the option of having respondents provide their comments to council. And when we did the research, again, the models run the gamut from providing no opportunity or commitment for respondents to participate and review findings other than their initial participation in the investigation, all the way to models that almost look like they give the respondents and complainants some extra consultation opportunities with the investigator that I would personally caution may go farther than necessary and impact the process. So we settled on recommending that we keep the code as is. Respondents will get a chance to make a rebuttal to the investigator before the investigator makes their final report to council. Yeah, another research question. Actually, sorry, no, this isn't a research question. This is an administrative-driven process. And this is a decision process. Under the current bylaw, it's really entirely silent on what happens at the decision stage after council receives a report. So we brought some detailed recommendations for a new process to COW. The motion was to adopt that and draft it in. So this is it. And it's basically a three-step process where the investigator will provide a briefing and then council will have a discussion with the respondent included. And then the third step would be council makes a decision with respondent not participating in that decision. I've drafted in that should be spread out over at least 2 meetings because on one hand there's a rationale to resolve complaints quickly, but on the other hand there may be cause for pause and deliberation in some cases. So spread out those 3 steps over at least 2 meetings. And then, of course, decide on reporting to the complainant if it wasn't done already by council along the way. That's it for me, subject to any questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Drietzig. Looking to council to determine if there are any questions. Councillor Ma?
Thank you, Your Worship. Great presentation, Mr. Drietzig. I had a question about the ADR pathway. So if the investigator is considering an alternative dispute resolution, is that decision solely at the behest of the investigator, or is that option put towards the council and then the council decides? And if the council decides, is that a unanimous council decision? Is it a vote towards that, or just like a soft look around the room? I'm just trying to figure out how that part travels through.
What we're proposing is that the assessment of whether a complaint should be is suitable for ADR and whether ADR should be attempted is the investigator's decision.
Okay.
So the starting point is right now the Code of Conduct gives the investigator the authority to assess the complaint and see if it's suitable for mediation. So my thinking was that it would be just kind of a natural extension of what's there to have the investigator make that assessment, but provide them with more ADR options rather than mere mediation. And I should add, under the current code, it's written so that the investigator would do the mediation.
Right.
But under the new code, it would have the investigator refer the matter to different ADR channels.
Okay, so if the investigator feels an ADR process is the way to go,
Yeah.
in good faith, we will follow that pathway, but we decouple the ADR investigation from the initial investigator.
Yes,
Yeah.
Exactly. And if the ADR is successful, great. If the ADR is unsuccessful, then the investigator will step back in and
Okay.
proceed with an investigation. But the investigator's discretion isn't unfettered. There's now going to be a list of factors as what's unsuitable for ADR. And they're professionals, so presumably they have that training, but sometimes it's good just to have that peace of mind that not everything is appropriate for ADR.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Just maybe a question around context. I understand that as part of your assessing the code of conduct as it was prior to any amendments, you attended I don't know if it was a conference or a workshop, and that you found that our code of conduct was actually in pretty good shape. So this is actually really making sense. It's good, even better.
Yeah,
Is that
we're
correct?
making a good thing better. But one alternative would be to do nothing.
Yeah.
The bylaw is fully compliant with the MGA as is, and it meets many of the best practices that I've seen presented on. It was actually at a municipal lawyers conference, in-house counsel and other lawyers who provide services to municipalities. And based on what they were presenting as best practices, we're pretty good as is.
Okay,
So
great.
we're improving on something.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I see none. Thank you very much. All right, I'll move that council give first reading to Council Code of Conduct Bylaw 2024-26. Would anyone like to speak to this motion? Well, I'll take the opportunity just to, building on what was just shared, I believe that we're in good shape, but it's always important to review and determine where you can even do better. So I'm fairly confident that this code of conduct with these amendments puts us in a state of leading the way in a good code of conduct and resolution processes. So I'm very happy to support these changes as presented. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I move that council give second reading to Council Code of Conduct Bylaw 2024-26. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I now move the council give leave to go to third reading of Council Code of Conduct Bylaw 2024-26. Call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And I'll move that council give third reading to Council Code of Conduct Bylaw 2024-26. Just speaking to the motion, I'd like to thank Mr. Driedzik for all the work that you've done, and first of all, bringing it to council to gauge our interest in various changes, and then setting out a very excellent report with options and good rationale for why we should proceed in a recommended way. It was very helpful and very well done, so thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Hillstad.
Just echoing the same sentiment. Basically, thank you for making a good bylaw better. So thanks to all the men and everyone else that worked on this, and I think we've come to a solid bylaw, so thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Okay, tell you what, we're going to just take a 10-minute break just because we're dealing with lots of stuff. This will allow Ms. Sauvé the opportunity to set up for the next portion, and we will return at 9:45. All right, we are back. And we are moving to item H1, Council Paid Medical Leaves Policy and Maternity and Parental Leaves Bylaw. And Ms. Sauvé, welcome to council.
Thank you. All right.
There we go.
Good morning, Mayor Krausert and members of council. I'm here today to present a paid medical leave policy for members of council and to seek council's approval of that policy as presented, and also to present the maternity and parental leaves bylaw, asking for council to give first, second, and third readings to that bylaw. A history of the Council Remuneration Committee already exists in the report, so I won't run through all of the details. But key things to note about that is that the committee was advisory in nature, and they were established for the purpose of making recommendations for council remuneration so that council remunerations could be planned to be fair and reasonable, attract a diverse and representative pool of candidates from Canmore's residents, and recognize the complexity, responsibilities, and time commitments of the role of elected officials. In June, Council accepted the recommendations of the committee and then directed administration to return to Council with options for a council and maternity leave bylaw, to return to Council with an option for a medical leave policy, and also to return with an updated council remuneration policy. So that brings us today. We're looking today at the maternity and parental leave bylaw and the medical leave policy, and updates to the council remuneration policy will be presented at a later date. A little bit of, I'm not moving things forward, sorry. A little bit of discussion. In terms of the committee's mandate in attracting diverse and representative members from our community to run, they really wanted to recognize that, looking at trying to remove barriers for people to run, they really wanted to recognize that significant circumstances, which might temporarily and in the short term prevent individuals from fulfilling some or all of their council duties, need not be circumstances that discourage members of the public from running for council, nor be something that should disqualify elected members of council from fulfilling their term and in service to the community. Specifically, the committee wanted to acknowledge those who might be planning to grow a family through birth and or adoption, or who have pending medical procedures. These individuals, they might be optimal representatives from our community, but might opt not to run for council due to the temporary period of time where they will or may need to withdraw from council responsibilities. Additionally, Article 174 of the Alberta Municipal Government Act states that any member of council absent from meetings for a period of 60 days will be disqualified, unless the absence is authorized by resolution of council prior to the end of that 60-day period. In 2017, this article was updated to allow councils to establish a maternity and parental leave bylaw that would exempt councillors from being disqualified when absent under the provisions of the bylaw. So, a review of the proposed presented bylaw. First off, the Municipal Government Act requires that maternity and parental leave bylaws contain provisions in respect to the length of a leave, the terms and conditions of the entitlement of the leaves, and also that the bylaw includes provisions on how the municipality will continue to be represented during the periods of leave. So we aimed to include all of those factors in the bylaw. So the terms that we are presenting are that maternity leave may be taken by the birth mother for a maximum consecutive period of 16 weeks, beginning no sooner than 8 weeks prior to the estimated due date, and ending no later than 8 weeks following the date the baby is born. This period is really deemed a medical period under regular employment standards and is only eligible for the birth mother. Also worth noting that under employment standards, the birth mother is required to take a minimum of 6 weeks after birth, unless there's a medical note provided stating that the return will not endanger the mother's health. So that's an important thing to note. This period for birth mother is very important. We also included that maternity leave for pregnant council members might be taken up to a maximum of 16 weeks in the case of a pregnancy loss. And then parental leave might be taken by either parent, for a maximum of 26 weeks, and that 26 weeks must be consecutive and completed within 78 weeks of the baby's birth. Our bylaw includes a notice requirement, which is that a member of council must provide at least 6 weeks written notice to the mayor and the chief administrative officer of their intent to take maternity and/or parental leave. And the notice must include the start date of the leave, the anticipated length of the leave, the estimated date of birth or adoption of the child, and if applicable, the nature of the circumstances that prevented the member from providing 6 weeks notice if that was not provided. Additionally, we included the requirement for a leave agreement, which after receiving the notice would be a written notice that would be signed, it would be a written agreement that would be signed prior to commencing the maternity and/or parental leave, and it would outline the duties that the members will not be performing during their leave, any duties that the member intends to continue to perform during all or part of their leave, and any other workplace accommodations required by the member. Amendments to the leave might be approved by council resolution for an extension or to grant an additional or subsequent leave, might be a medical leave or some other kind of leave. And the mayor and CAO can approve amendments to the conditions about which duties will be performed by who. Okay. Also included in the bylaw is a section on representation. This would address the requirements of the MGA. And under this section, the mayor must arrange for coverage of the tasks and duties of the member that the member will not continue to perform. And this would include council resolutions for committees and deputy mayor appointments as required. And also the mayor will provide notification to any committees and other affected parties of the leave and who will be providing the interim coverage. Remuneration matches what is provided to town employees and indicates that during a maternity or parental leave council will be remunerated at 75% of their basic rate of pay. And that council will also continue to be eligible for all other amounts, expenses, and benefits as set out under the council remuneration policy. Oh, it went backwards. Okay. I'd like to move on to medical leaves at this point. Important to note that the Alberta Municipal Government Act exemption for parental and maternity leave does not apply to any other types of leave. So this means that councillors may still be disqualified from council unless a resolution of council is passed prior to the end of the 60-day absence period. So we've presented a separate policy. There's nothing under this policy that would exempt council from requiring to pass a resolution of council to approve a leave. That will still need to happen. But the benefit of having a policy really lies in that it establishes clear and consistent terms for leaves and eligibility for those leaves, the duration of those leaves, and how remuneration is handled during those leaves. And this prevents council from having to make case-by-case and circumstance-by-circumstance decisions. It also provides public and transparent communication for future potential council candidates who might be deciding whether or not to run, and provides transparency to the public. The terms presented in the leave in the policy match very closely to what was proposed or presented in the maternity and parental leave bylaw. The eligibility period is defined as 15 weeks, and this is a typical amount for a short-term medical leave. Member of council must still provide notice in writing to the mayor and chief administrative officer that includes the start date of the leave, the anticipated length of the leave, and then provides medical documentation supporting the leave. We also recommend a leave agreement similar to that provided for the maternity and parental leaves that outlines, again, the duties the member will not be performing during the leave, any duties that the member intends to perform during the leave, and then any other workplace accommodations that are required for their medical condition. Amendments to the leave can be changed in a similar fashion by council resolution for an extension, and also to approve amendments to the conditions that were set out for which items will be performed and not, and who will backfill. Similar to the bylaw, we also included a section that outlines representation, which is that the mayor and CAO would arrange for coverage of the tasks that won't be covered by the absent member, would provide notification to any committees or affected parties, and those are the key items. Maternity, a person on medical leave may, at their discretion, continue to participate, but we would in this case require a medical note outlining that it is safe for the person to perform those duties. And then remuneration, very similar. Council would continue to be remunerated at 75% of the basic rate that's set out in the council remuneration policy. And council members would continue to be eligible for all other amounts, expenses, and benefits as set out in the council remuneration policy. Outlined in the request for decision were two alternatives to potentially be considered as added to the medical leaves policy. So we presented what administration was directed to present, but we do see that there are two potential alternatives to include. One would be family caregiver leave, which would be a paid leave of absence to care for a critically injured or ill family member. We would match the legislation on these two items, up to 36 weeks for the critical illness of a child, up to 16 weeks for the critical illness of an adult. Also including compassionate care leave, which would be for a member to take a period of leave up to 27 weeks to care for an immediate family member who has a serious medical condition and significant risk of dying within 6 months. These leaves match employment standards and employment insurance coverage periods, and we would recommend that the compensation match the other leaves that were presented today. In terms of financial impacts, no additional budget is required to establish these leaves. Council's compensation and benefits are already budgeted for, and there is no additional cost to providing for these leaves. In summary, the bylaw and the policy that are presented today are based on the recommendations from the Council Remuneration Committee and the direction of Council in June. The policy and the bylaw terms are aligned and equitable for compensation and benefits. The policy and the bylaw terms, we believe, will remove barriers for potential future candidates and also better accommodate current members of council and should be effective immediately, and no additional budget is required to provide for these leaves for council members.
There's the recommendations, and thank you very much, Ms. Sauvé. I will now open it up to council to see if there are any questions. Councillor Maw.
Thank you, Worship. Great presentation, Ms. Sauvé. When I was reading through the analysis of alternatives, I really caught my eye on the family caregiver leave and the compassionate care leave. And I think maybe it's because I'm just of that age where I have friends, we're sandwich generation. Stuff is like flaring up with like parents, and there's all the other sort of stuff. If we were to potentially consider adopting those leaves into our policy, would you still treat them the same sort of format as, say, the other medical leaves, where there's an agreement formed, what duties are applied, and all that sort of stuff?
Absolutely. I believe if we were to include these leaves, they could be incorporated into the current medical leaves policy
Okay.
with an amendment, and that all of the other conditions would apply for notice, for leave agreement, and for representation of the community.
Okay, great. A curious question. I was like, under compassionate care leave, they give you up to 27 weeks, and for some of the other ones, like I see 26 weeks. Is there any sort of rationale behind that, or is that just the way it is?
It's about what the legislation outlines.
Okay, all right. I was just curious if there's some sort of rationale. Thank you.
So just continuing on that questioning, by my read of the policy, there would actually have to be a number of changes made throughout the policy if we were to include either or family caregiver or compassionate care leave, including definitions, changing wording from here to there. Is it probably something that would be best added by yourself when you have time to think about it, as opposed to us trying to do so here today?
If council would like to consider amending the policy to include these leaves, it would be best to take it away, incorporate those items into the policy, and bring it back.
Okay, great. So I'll just let council know that based on an expression of interest that Councillor Ma had of adding these in, I will be making a motion to postpone with regards to the policy only, not regarding the maternity or parental leave. And so if you are supportive of those going in, then I suggest at that time that you support the postponement. If you're not, then vote against the postponement, and we'll go with where the majority leads us. Okay. Any other questions on either of these proposed bylaws / policies? No? Thank you very much for all the work done. These are excellent, and thank you for your presentation today.
Thank you.
So I'll now ask Mr. Stiver to put up onto the screen the postponement motion that I would like to make, please. Okay, I move that council postpone consideration of proposed policy EX 010 until the November 5th, 2024 regular meeting of council, and direct administration to return with a revised policy adding components of family caregiver leave and compassionate care leave, including renaming the proposed policy accordingly. In speaking to the motion, I do support the addition of these items, and I thank Councillor Ma for spearheading the addition of them. Given the number of changes that would have to be made, and some of them very small, but some of them just making sure that they all weave together well, I think it's best to put this back into the hands of administration, and particularly the Sauvé, to craft the changes so they fit well together, and then bring this back to our consideration at the next meeting of council. And I had just spoken during the break with Ms. Sauvé, and she thought that was a good way forward, and the timing works well. I'm seeing a nodding head, so I would ask for your support. Once again, if you're not in favor of adding these, then please vote against the postponement, because I do not want to put this work on Ms. Sauvé's plate if it doesn't have the support of council. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Ma.
Thank you again, Your Worship. I just wanted to thank Ms. Sauvé for bringing these pieces up. I think it's going to give us a more robust policy, and also I think one of the goals of this council has been trying to make the role of a councillor or elected official more accessible for future councils. And I think clarifying these sort of pieces gives a bit of peace of mind towards future councillors if they're considering running in case these various unfortunate situations may arise. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Ms. Sauvé, and Your Worship and Councillor Ma for highlighting this one. I am certainly supportive of this. It does make this position more accessible for more people, and that is always a good thing. And so, therefore, I will be supportive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the postponing motion. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I'll now move that Council give first reading to maternity and parental leaves for elected officials bylaw 2024-28. Speaking to the motion, as is the theme through the whole remuneration review process, is to ensure that we have a reasonable offering here for those who wish to run for council. It's a very difficult job. It is can be very stressful at times, and of course, life also continues on, and people will, as we've seen in Banff recently, require a maternity leave or parental leave, and that's only fair that this position offer those options to those who wish to run for council, should those circumstances arrive for them. So I support this bylaw. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I move that Council give second reading to maternity and parental leaves for elected officials bylaw 2024-28. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I now seek leave from Council to go to third reading of the maternity and parental leave for elected officials bylaw 2024-28. Call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And I'll move that Council give third reading to maternity and parental leaves for elected officials bylaw 2024-28. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And we will now move to the final item for today. Item H2. Alberta Community Partnership Grant, Bow Valley Evacuation Modeling and Plan. Ms. Miller, welcome to Council.
Thank you, and hello, Mayor and Council. If Mr. Schneider was your opening act, I'm happy to be your closing act today. So for this item, together with the Town of Banff and the MD of Bighorn, we would like to submit a grant application for the Alberta Community Partnership Grant to do a project that we're calling the Bow Valley Evacuation Modeling and Plan. I'll get into the details in a minute, but this project does have the potential to significantly increase preparedness and resiliency within the Bow Valley. When disaster strikes in one community in the Bow Valley, it will affect the others, either directly or indirectly, and we've had this conversation at Council before. An evacuation of one or more community in the Bow Valley puts pressure on the transportation network that connects the municipalities. Wildfire continues to be the top-rated hazard throughout the Bow Valley and is the most likely hazard to cause an event that requires simultaneous evacuation of more than one community. Given the hotter and wilder weather that we are facing due to climate change, the fact that our communities are developed well into the wildland-urban interface, and the increased visitation that we're seeing year over year, it is important to work together collectively to understand what a regional evacuation could look like, and to use that information to better inform our community-level evacuation plans and to create a regional plan as well. In 2021, we saw a wildfire near Dead Man's Flats, and it's a good example of how an incident in the region can disrupt traffic quickly. Due to the fire's proximity to the Trans-Canada Highway, the highway was quickly shut down for fire operations. This then impacted traffic within the surrounding communities and was certainly felt in Canmore. While Canmore, Banff, and the MD of Bighorn all have community-level evacuation plans, we can increase our preparedness and understanding of the impacts when an evacuation is issued for more than one community. All directors of emergency management in Canmore, the town of Banff, and the MD of Bighorn understand that early evacuation is critical during a wildfire threat. The grant funding we are going for will further support our plans for early evacuations and increase our understanding of just how much we impact each other when we're evacuating. So the purpose of this project, as I mentioned, is to better understand how the evacuation of one or multiple communities within the Bow Valley impacts the transportation network and how emergency managers can prepare for effective and timely evacuations. Modeling of evacuations from and within each community and how they impact traffic flow throughout the Bow Valley has not yet been completed, and this information would greatly assist emergency management planners in the three communities to better understand the potential impacts when another community is evacuating, or if two or more communities are evacuating at the same time. Now again, each community does have an evacuation plan, but there's no regional evacuation plan. So the partnership will engage with a consultant to develop evacuation modeling based on a variety of scenarios to better understand traffic flows, pinch points, expected congestion, expected contingencies, gas station flows, and impacts on other communities, just as examples. The information from the modeling will then be used to update our community-level evacuation plans and to create a regional evacuation plan. Now, I want to be clear, we currently have a robust evacuation plan in each community. We're not doing this project because nothing exists, but it's to complement and improve existing evacuation plans. Emergency management operates on the concept of continual improvement, and we are always looking for ways to make sure that we have the best plans possible to keep the community safe. Reviewing existing plans with new perspectives and in collaboration with neighboring municipalities has helped highlight the need for this project. There are several benefits to Canmore that could be realized should this grant application be approved. This will enhance our community-level evacuation plans by providing the most updated information on traffic flows throughout the community. It will prepare the region for simultaneous evacuation for multiple communities so that we can better anticipate and deconflict potential pinch points or issues with flow. And for this one, I often think about Harvey Heights especially, and Dead Man's Flats, and how those two would likely be evacuating at the same time as us, depending on what the hazard is. It will also prepare Canmore for the impacts of other communities needing to evacuate through the Bow Valley. I can see a time where we may ask people to stay home and only travel if necessary, if another community is required to facilitate an evacuation and we want to make sure that they have good flow through here, or maybe they need our gas stations, that kind of thing. We also want to prepare for the impact of visitors and travelers to and through the region. We know that congestion already exists on the highways on busy, beautiful weekends, and we want to better understand how to best prepare for that. And again, we want to increase our preparedness for multimodal transportation. We already have evacuation plans to address people who are not reliant on personal vehicles or don't have access to one, but we can increase our understanding of how potentially redeploying transit to assist with evacuation impacts the whole transportation system in each community and what other resources may be available or may be needed during that time. If this grant application is successful, the work will be led by the Directors of Emergency Management from the Town of Canmore, Town of Banff, and the MD of Bighorn, with support from the engineering and transportation teams in each respective municipality. Consultants who specialize in transportation modeling will be engaged, and we'll be looking for professionals who can capture the complexities that exist within the region, including geographical boundaries, the shared and limited transportation networks, and the decreasing number of people reliant on personal vehicles throughout their days, and the number of visitors and travelers in and through the region. The grant amount being applied for is $150,000, and if approved, administration will return with a request to add a new capital project funded by the Alberta Community Partnership Grant to approve this work. So with that, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those, but this is the recommendation that we're putting forward, that the submission of the application be approved by council.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. And I'm looking to Councillor Faubert to ask a question.
Thank you, Mayor Crosser. Thank you, Ms. Miller. When a community is evacuated, how is it decided where they will evacuate to?
Yeah, good question. It depends on where the hazard is and what the hazard is. So when there's a wildfire threat, we know most likely scenario is that it's coming from down valley from the Banff area. That said, we also know that the last few major wildfires that have impacted communities have been abnormal and different conditions and have impacted evacuation routes, and they weren't the expected way to go. So until an incident happens and until disaster strikes, it's really hard to say for sure where we would be going, but it would be the safest route and to a community that has capacity to take us in, or at least to stop by and grab supplies. And it may be asking people to drive quite a ways before they reach the community with the reception center for them. But it's very, very, very variable based off the conditions.
Is Alberta Emergency Management involved?
Yeah, at that point, they would be involved in our mutual aid agreements with different partners would be involved. If they're also impacted, or if it doesn't make sense to go that way, then we would look to the province to help assist in finding the right way to go. But certainly, as if we're doing any type of evacuation, the Alberta Emergency Management Agency is already contacted and involved at that point.
And then the other community that provides the evacuation services, who compensates them for that?
They're compensated a couple of different ways. There's the disaster relief program, and there's a few other grant funding, and it really depends on mutual aid agreements and what that looks like as to who's paying who at what time. It can be complicated.
And I have a few more questions.
Sure.
But, okay.
Go ahead.
And then you had mentioned, I was curious about visitors, and especially Banff National Park and Kananaskis Country. And I think you had mentioned that visitors would be included. What about the evacuation plans for those agencies? Are they involved?
Not directly at this time, just with timing, capacity, and other things going on. Town of Canmore, Town of Banff, and MD of Bighorn are the directors of emergency management that signed on to this one at this time.
And then I'm asking, so it's sort of come into my head in this moment, a question around who pay, like if visitors get evacuated, are we responsible for paying for their evacuation? Or are we only responsible for our residents?
Yeah, that's a good question, and oftentimes with emergency social services, so when for the cost of the evacuation of the area, that cost is often borne by the jurisdiction that is responsible for the event. Now, hosting them afterwards, they would have their own travel insurance at a certain point, so it might be for those immediate needs. So for example, in 2021, we hosted a reception center for people that were stranded on the highway, and because it was in our area, we did that, we bore the cost. I'm not sure if the costs were recuperated after that from anyone in particular, given that a lot of it was through traffic, but it's also dependent on the incident, but oftentimes with visitors going through, there's less of an expectation to host them for a long time.
Yeah. I ask because while you do, like, there's important work in terms of this plan, and I totally 100% support it, there might be work for us in terms of advocacy around municipal affairs and how disasters are paid for. But I have one more question.
Sure, just adding to that. Of course, many of us attended Alberta municipalities last week, and there certainly were questions and I believe a resolution around clarity being sought from the province as to compensation for communities who are essentially being good Samaritans and helping to make sure that they're not left holding a big, expensive bag of money flowing out without some promise that it will be reimbursed so that the host community is not left at a loss because of it.
Yeah, and I didn't know if that would be part of what the consultant would look at, but
Not as a part of this project, as that's more on the emergency social services side and the hosting and reception center side. It is a good flag, though, and we can take it back.
And then sort of watching what the experience of the community of Jasper this summer, my mind was put towards thinking about a reentry plan. And is that something, like we have an evacuation plan, we're looking at a regional evacuation plan. Is that something that can be done, is creating a plan for reentry, or is that really not an area that type of a plan in terms of emergency response is a standard practice?
No, reentry planning is certainly something that you can plan ahead for in the same way that you plan for evacuations, where it can be very circumstantial based off of how extensive the damage was, what was damaged, and really based around what critical infrastructure, and it kind of flows from there. From if you have certain amounts of critical infrastructure, then you can re-enter faster. It would be out of the scope of this project as well, but is something that can be and is planned for.
Okay, good. Just thinking about what we were seeing in our neighboring community and trying to be prepared myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I will move that council approve the submission of an Alberta Community Partnership Grant application for a Bow Valley Evacuation Modeling and Plan Project. In speaking in support of this motion, I want to recognize how our emergency planning continues to evolve based on what we see elsewhere and constantly wanting to take it to the next level. We've had longstanding emergency plans in place locally. However, now we're seeing, we have our Bow Valley Regional Emergency Management Plan under the bylaw that we passed recently. So there's that, taking it to the next level. With regards to fire guards, and we started to advocate for that last year, and the Ministry of Forestry and Parks has created a fund, and there was a collaboration, especially between Canmore and Alberta Parks, to come up with the details around that. That's taking it to the next level, touching those things that are out of our direct control and being able to now have that project be beneficial to our community. And likewise here, taking it to the next level with regards to what is the impact on immediate neighbors if there's evacuation of only one as opposed to the other, if both or all that are involved have to evacuate, and making sure that the plans speak to each other and are integrated. And so I really appreciate this work of continually making our plans better and not sitting idly waiting for the emergency and then determining what has to be done, but trying to get as many pieces in place, tools essentially, that would allow us to respond to whatever we're presented with in the future in a better manner. So I'm very thankful for that. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Your Worship. Super happy to support this plan. Thank you, Ms. Miller, our mighty DEM, and your continual vigilance and abundance of caution. The macro approach towards how we evacuate this regional area is super helpful and I think really worthwhile. Just coming back from Alberta munis, such as many councillors, and had a chance to talk to some of my friends that are councillors in Jasper, and it was a big deal, 25,000 people, like not just the residents, but visitors, hikers, everyone. They got everyone out and no one got hurt in that immediate evacuation, which is huge. And I remember one of the counselors saying, you know, when I evacuated, I didn't really expect it was going to be that bad, but it did get that bad, and half the elected officials lost their homes. In terms of leveling up, Mayor Krausert, I think personally, we could all level up as well. If you have not gotten the Voyant app, please get that. Also, keep that gas tank at least half full. Like talking to councilors in Jasper, people were struggling for gas, and I think if you can do that preemptive thing, keeping your tank full, that's really helpful. And other than that, time is on our side, so that's your friend, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else wishing to speak to this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And now I will move that we adjourn the meeting. All those in favor? Carried